Hello and welcome to a Max Chroma tutorial video. In today's video, I'm going to be showing a couple of updates I've made to some products on the payhip.com/maxchroma webpage. I've changed the price of the Max Chroma Master Colorist Action Pack to just $50. It used to be $100, and I had a social discount where if you shared it on social media, you'd get 50% off, but I decided just to make it $50 and no social discount. There was a product that came free along with that purchase called the Max Chroma Color Blender and Halftone Tessellator, and I've now made this completely free to download by itself, so you don't have to purchase anything else. This can be installed into Photoshop. It's a plugin panel, and it works in Photoshop CC version 14. That's the pre-2014 version. I have a video on my YouTube channel that shows how to install that version and install the plugin panel. It also has, it works with CS6, and it also has a whole bunch, like hundreds of different scripts that the buttons will run, and you can still run those scripts in other versions of Photoshop. Okay, the highlight of this video is going to be the update I've been working on and now finished for the Max Chroma HCWB custom color range action. That's also free, and the update will be free. Now, when you go to download things off of here, you can enter any email address. It doesn't have to be a real email address, and you'll be able to just download that. If you give me your email address, then you'll get the updates when I send them out. What I'm going to do with this is basically send out an update with a link to download the new updated file. But again, this is just a free action, and I'm really excited to get into this new update. But first, basically, let me show you. I may include the old version 1.0 and the new version 2.0 in the download. But basically, if I have Photoshop open, I'm going to go ahead and actually remove this action. And we're going to first look at what we had with the original version 1 of the HCWB custom color range. So I double-clicked on that, went into my actions panel. I could also load it from here, do load actions, find it, install it, or drag it into Photoshop when it's open. So I'm going to go ahead and click this as button mode, and I usually move the panel over to the left. And I've also got the panel nested in right here next to my tools. And essentially what you would do is you can either use the color picker or the eyedrop tool to color sample what you want to extract, and it'll basically create a mask from any flattened image of that color region and let you make some adjustments into how it blends into the other areas of color. If you have the color wheel open in your color panel, you can also set something there, but I would recommend eyedropping from the actual image, and you see how those sliders change around. You'll also notice that the color wheel follows the HWB or HCWB, hue around a circle of 360 degrees of hue, and we have chroma here, whiteness, and blackness, but they haven't changed the sliders or updated it to actually be an HCWB slider method. A lot of programs have not quite implemented HWB color models into their architecture. That is something I'll cover in other videos. It is now included in the CSS level 4 standards for web development. People can now set colors based on HWB. What I've done is investigated and researched a lot of that stuff and found ways to work within Photoshop to create the HCWB extractions. And then, like in the previous videos I made about using the difference blending mode, you can start to extract custom colors with that. I go ahead and split it up and then run the difference on each of those. I'll get into that in future videos showing exactly how this stuff works. It's pretty exciting. Now you basically just click your foreground color, set it this way, or the eyedropper, and I'm going to go ahead and pick a mid-tone just to show for this video. You see that's right in the middle of that triangle there. And in the original version 1.0 of the custom color range action, you would click this right here and run the color range action. It's going to go through, like I said, a series of steps, splitting up the hue, the whiteness, the blackness, the chroma, and then it uses extractions from the color that you picked of the hue, whiteness, blackness, and chroma to run a difference of those over each other and then recombine. So clicking on this layer I could look at the effects and see that I could just add a color overlay and make that whatever I want, or I can create a new solid color fill and really change that around to any color I want. It's already masked out based on the selection. The things that I've updated is how it makes those masks, like how it blends the things together, and the adjustment control that you have over it. So in the original 1.0, if you want to start making adjustments to that mask, you go to the adjustment section and you click on either maximum, medium, or minimum range. I'm going to click on maximum range, medium, and minimum. So you see that those are basically, what they're doing is just changing the blend modes of these various groups. You don't really got to look at these groups. It's kind of a big complicated collection of how these layers extract the work. But what I'll do is first just show, the maximum, medium, and minimum ranges just change how those layers blend together. So I'll look at the maximum range, and then I'm going to go to filter the layers. I could do by kind and actually just do adjustment layers. And if I go up to the window properties, I've got the properties panel right here. If I click on one of these adjustment layers, like the master levels, I can quickly just start making levels adjustments. And I'll zoom out a little so it just works quicker. So I can make master adjustments to the levels, master curves adjustments, okay? And then we've got hue angle. That won't be reflected in this test file. I'm only looking at one hue. It's just red. The blackness levels, okay, so you see how that's essentially adjusting how much of that color is blending into the blackness, but also to the tint side of things. So this was what the version 1.0 custom color range had. Now I also sometimes like to filter it just by name and then levels, and this will be important in the updated version. So I can look at just the levels, so the hue, chroma, white and black, HCWB, and the master. So hue angle, I'll show that in a different test file. I went to make this video a few minutes ago and I had way too many test files open, and I also realized if I'm zoomed out a little bit, the adjustments are faster. So with just one file, we're going to look at things one at a time. The hue angle would be a separate file when I'll get into just how much the updated version works a lot better. But the hue angle would work as well if you had multiple hues in here. So let's just go to the chroma levels. So you can see what I'm doing is changing the levels, and it's adjusting how much it blends into the chroma and to the gray. Whiteness will go in the other direction, so how much it blends into the whiteness and the shades. This is because it's a mid-tone. Blackness levels. Okay, so if I adjust each of these, you see I'm tightening it in a certain direction, however I want. Okay, and you still have control over the master levels themselves, right? So that's how version 1.0 worked, and after you made some adjustments, you want to go ahead and turn off that filtering, so you're still looking at all of the layers, and I could just say replace color mask. And now that would update the mask with the new area that I selected, what I made adjustments to. I can turn on that color overlay again and recolor the artwork this way, or essentially do anything I want with this adjustment. So that's how the version 1 worked. And let's just close this test file, and we'll keep looking at this one, not get into the hue angle just yet. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this action, and I'm going to install Max Chroma HCWB Color Range 2. Double click that. Double click that file, and then you can look at the actions this way. You can see there's a whole bunch more added to this update. To make it simple, I like to have it in button mode, and then I'm going to keep the mid-tone selected as my color right there, and with the eyedropper I can select any color. We'll get into the other color points in a second. I'm going to run the HCWB Custom Color Range 2. Now there's two different ways in which it works now, not just the difference method, but a divide method. And this is part of the update that I've made and found some new ways to control essentially both sides of that gradient independently. I'll just click the HCWB Custom Color Range 2 and then show how these other buttons work and what to pay attention to, sort of the way to use it the best and the workflow. And you can really ignore all of these actions down here that say conditional actions, automated, not for user. These are some smart actions I've put in here that help this thing to function a little bit better with the new divide method. So I'm just going to click this, color range 2. And it may take a little longer to run because it's going through creating additional layers. It's something I'll teach in the how-to videos that show how I've created these actions, how it works. It's pretty exciting stuff. I've basically figured out how to split up the gradient and make it so I can control both sides of the mask for each of the chroma, whiteness, blackness, and hue angles as well, custom hue angle, etc. And you see it's making the detection layers, so it'll kind of determine things based on the color that you've picked and try to set the best mode for those to extract what you've pulled from your original image. So it essentially works on a flat image, or if you have a document with a lot of layers and groups, it'll just duplicate and then merge things. It won't change your original document. So after it's run, you can see, like I said before, if I click on this layer, I can make a new solid color fill layer and change that around to anything I want. And you can see the selection that it's made. You can also just click on this and add color overlay. You have to double click it and change it here. It doesn't quite work in real time if you do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the workflow now, and I'll have my properties panel open. And you don't want to click the divide ranges or difference ranges. These are if you find one that really works routinely the right way you want. You can, instead of clicking the HCWB custom color range 2 action, you can run one of these instead. So these you would not run after this point. You would go down to making adjustments. So I'm just going to click make adjustments. And now I can view this as the custom color that I've selected. And that just turns on this custom colorizer layer for manual adjustments. I can view it as a positive, meaning the selection point is black and it fades out to white. View it as a negative, which a lot of people working with masks or the way that layer masks work is usually as negatives. They allow things to come through where it's white. It's basically transparent, or it's transparent. It's showing the things that come through. Where it's black, it's going to make everything else transparent and sort of knock it out from that. And view masked over original is going to essentially go back to what you had before without going through and replacing the color mask after you make adjustments. So this little adjustment section, again, can make adjustments, view it as a custom color while making adjustments, view it as a positive while making adjustments, view it as a negative, view masked over the original, but this, you don't make adjustments to this because it's essentially got the entire layer filled with the color, and then using the mask you made, you can still make mask adjustments here, but you can't change all of the other adjustments and see what's happening. So when making adjustments, we'll click the make adjustments action. Now I'll wait till I do the other test file to show the hue. So you can do manual hue ramp mode or the regular difference hue ramp mode. And then we've got difference mode or divide mode. And that changes essentially how the blending of the layers work together. And we've got divide mode blending, and then like we had in 1.0, maximum blending, medium blending, minimum blending. Okay, we're going to go back to divide mode blending. And we've also got things that control the grayscale ranges. And I guess this could work if I show even on this one. It's usually if you selected a grayscale or chromatic gray, and a midtone is kind of like a chromatic gray. I'll say if I want to do grayscale full range, that actually includes everything, all the colors. So you see some of that cyan, that dark cyan background is now included in the mask, and the gray is included in the mask. Hue range is going to put it back to what I had before. Chromatic is going to be like it includes the gray into that, but not the other colors. And we can have neutral only. So this is only selecting the neutral grays, and chromatic only. Okay, but that's including all of the other hues. So I'm going to go back to hue range, which is what this one really was to begin with. But again, based on the new color range 2.0 method, it automatically kind of selects that for you. So we're making adjustments, and now let's look at the new ways in which we have to create some adjustments. And you see that it just shows tone and it doesn't show the other labels. I may open up the other test file in just a minute to show you, but I think I can do it just by grabbing the original artwork layer, putting it on top, turning that on, and just bringing the opacity in there a little bit. So you can see the original over this, just fade it out a bit, and it'll help to read it while I'm making these adjustments. So I can filter by adjustment layers, but you can see there's a lot of them. And the way that I'd like to filter is just by the levels and curves controls for right now. So I'm actually going to say filter by name, and I'm just going to type in levels. So now I can see that I've got the chroma levels total, whiteness levels total, blackness levels total, hue angle levels. That really won't change anything for this test image. But let's go ahead and now look at what we have. So before, in the 1.0 method, if I was changing the chroma levels, you see how I can adjust how much that blends into the chroma or the neutrals. But now I've got chroma levels blending into chroma. So you can see I can control that only where it blends into the more chromatic color, blending into neutral. So I can control both sides of that gradient now. That mask has double the control as it did before. So whiteness levels total, both sides of it, like 1.0. The 2.0 version now has blending into whiteness, so how much that mask blends into the white here. And blending into shades. And it makes a little more sense when it's a mid-tone color, so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Blends, how much it blends into the shades. And then we've got blackness total, like the 1.0 version. And blending into blackness. Okay, so only from that point how it blends into there. Blending into the tints would be the other side, just like so. And the hue angle, we'll now go ahead and look at a different test file. But basically, if I want to, let me turn off the filter and turn off that original layer on top. I'll just delete it. It's a copy. So looking at the adjustments, we also have curves instead of levels. Let's go ahead and look at those. So the curves, same thing. Curves blending into chroma. And I can change the panel options to make that a little smaller if I want. Look at the full chroma, the full curve properties. So the curves blending into the chroma only, like that, right? We've got curves blending into neutral. Okay, and let's just maybe make a few adjustments so you kind of get how it works. Let's do the whiteness curves blending into the shades. Okay, let's do blackness blending into the tints. Control it however we want. We could go back to levels. Let's change some of the chroma levels. And again, you can also, change some of these endpoints if you want as well. Let's just pull that out of the chroma. Let's go to the master levels and just make a master level adjustment. Like so. Okay, so I'm going to turn off that filter. So I'm looking at all the layers again. And since I'm done making some adjustments, I'm going to go ahead and do replace color mask. Now, there's also another thing I've set with localized masking. And if you want to, you could also select an area first and create the mask based on the selection. But first, just after making adjustments and before we get into that new updated part, I'm just going to do replace color mask. Like in the 1.0 version, it's gone and updated the color mask. We can look at that in the panel options. And so you see I've got this. Maybe I'll go ahead and make the new color layer here. And I can just change that to any color I want, make adjustments to that as being masked out. Okay. Let's see. Next, we'll go ahead and let's say we wanted to make a mask-based adjustment. So I'll go back to Make Adjustments, and I want to do mask based on selection. Now, if I don't have a mask and I just click it, I have a little warning that pops up. It says, you must first make a selection around the area you wish to include in the custom color mask. What is outside your selection will be masked out from the custom color group. You may use any amount of square, elliptical, polygonal, or lasso marquee selections, and just do continue. So let's go ahead and grab some. We'll do a circular selection, maybe just over this. Then let's go ahead and do a lasso selection. Maybe I just want this right here. I'm just showing this for intents and purposes, how it works. And maybe a polygonal selection. And let's say I just want these areas here. So I've got a selection now made. I'm going to go ahead and say mask based on selection. So you see that's gone ahead and created a mask over the group that says it's a new group, master custom mask group for localized area selection. And we can see that's actually masked over if I turn the original on. So it's masked out my selection like so. Everything else is transparent. And you can adjust this still with a feathering. So the mask itself now has, and these are in some of the newer versions of Photoshop, I can go ahead and feather that mask selection if I want to automatically. So you see it feathering the selection, right? And that's like typical layer mask adjustments you can make. So let's go ahead and we'll do replace color mask. And now you can see how that's been masked out like that. Again, if I go to that mask, I can feather it. Okay. So just as an example, and you can see that mask. If I go to channels, look at it. You can see how that selection has been feathered, but we have control over it. I decided not to automatically feather it. Keep the selection you had, not change this, and you can determine how much you want to feather it. Okay. Let's close this and look at a new test file that gets a little bit more in-depth into how the updated version works. First, I'm going to show essentially with the chromatic model, hue, chroma, whiteness, and blackness. This is an HCL model, hue, chroma, and lightness. But the whiteness, blackness is basically just changing these points to be white and black instead of just one gradient of lightness. Color models and color spaces are essentially like a 3D object, and how color is looked at within that object, it basically creates a three-dimensional thing. So it's hard to show in 2 dimensions. You see how in this, they kind of have to show it cut out, and you don't see all of the colors at once. But you can see how the hue goes around 360 degrees. It's sort of like a double-sided cone. And the chroma goes from the neutral points, black to white, outward, being more chromatic, goes towards the hue itself, the pure hue. And let's just go ahead and look at some test files that show this. And I've sort of set it up in a certain way. Let me look at this by details with names. This one right here. Actually, I'm going to open it in Photoshop, drag it right in. Okay. So what I've done with this is actually split apart, created sort of, imagine it like that cone or kind of like a cylinder with the blackness to the whiteness through the center and the hue angle around it. And picture it like I've just sliced it into 5 slices, black, dark gray, medium gray, light gray, and white. And I'm trying to show how the custom color range selects an area, any color you want, and then the adjustments that you make are kind of like expanding or reducing within that 3D object, how it's getting to other colors. And so you've got hue angle, chroma, which is the particular hue you're at, whether it goes from gray or anything neutral towards a more pure chroma, and whiteness and blackness. Then we've got tints, shades, and tones. And then here's that other triangle-based color wheel. So the color wheel itself is not really like the 3D object. The 3D object is really the other way around. It has the gray in the center, and that's essentially how different colors really are from each other. A lot of slightly chromatic grays, they're not very different from each other when you start changing the hue around. Okay, so if I'm in a reddish gray and I go a little bit over to yellowish, just around the hue circle, it's not really changing that color very much. So that's why they're at the center. And the hue angles, they change a lot more in their appearance. White at the white at the top, black at the bottom. Again, they're more different from each other, so they're further apart in that 3D shape. Okay, and this does run in 16-bit if you select things from here. And we're going to go ahead and what I've done is created some other test files, already set them up. Let's say we extracted the pure red. Okay. And that would have been like I picked my foreground color and set it to a pure red of 0 degrees, 100% saturated and bright, or essentially has no whiteness and blackness. It's 100% chroma. So if I had gone and run that on all of this, it would give me what we've got here. If I want to go ahead and do make adjustments, we can see automatically how it has extracted the red hue, and the hue angle fades out to the yellow and the magenta. You can see how it's the chroma fading out to gray. No whiteness and blackness in there. And what I've done for this video is already kept the labels separate. So when making these adjustments, the mask doesn't have those labels. Everything is, in black and white like this. For the video, I decided just to help to teach what's happening here with the adjustments by splitting up the labels and pulling them to a separate layer while making the adjustments. And again, here I'm just going to close that, and maybe I'll go to 8-bit like so for the video. So I've clicked on make adjustments, and again I can view it as the custom color, as the red. Let me turn off that layer. View it as a positive, a negative, masked over the original, or back to making adjustments. Now the hue ramping. So we have manual hue ramping mode or difference hue ramping mode. Difference mode is going to pull pretty much the same thing with this one. It depends on if it's an orange or other hues, how that extracts the hues next to it. But difference hue ramp is usually the original mode. And we're going to look at manual hue ramp mode. Let me go ahead and make the layer options just a little bit smaller so we can read it and show you. All right. And what that does is turns on manual hue angle selector, manual hue ramp selector, and it turns off the difference technique. Okay, you still have hue angle levels and hue angle curves. If we just go to those and change the hue angle levels, you can see that it's moving that. And again, maybe I'll turn on this layer so you can see what I mean, that is changing the levels of the hue angle being selected. Let's go ahead and look at the manual hue angle selector. So this is where you're actually changing what you've selected out. So if I start changing the hue, this opens up an adjustment layer, and I'm in properties of the adjustment layer. If I go ahead and start changing the hue, you see it moving and really selecting totally different colors now, right? So this is, I'm essentially changing it. It's not a red that I was selecting anymore, right? You can see now I'm selecting more of a violet. So that really depends. If you start changing that, you're not selecting the original red color or the original hue that you had picked. Okay, so I'm going to keep that at 0 for this. The manual hue ramp selector, however, is going to only function to begin with on the reds. So when you go to manual hue ramp mode, you might not see anything until you go ahead to click on master, switch to reds. We want to move down a little bit so we can see this is the ramp. And if your hue that you picked is not showing up, you're going to have to move that to the hue area that you want. But essentially, you can see what happens with the ramp. Now, the darkest points are by these two lines here, and then the end points, the lightest, are right there. So let's say going towards yellow, okay, I can decide to take more in, right, of the orange and expand it even further. And this one makes a little more sense right here. Okay, so you can see how I'm essentially grabbing more of those hues into the mask. I could really tighten it down and say I don't want anything past that orange point, 20 degrees. And maybe I want more stuff to be completely in the mask towards the red. Go all the way that way. You can really select, and you see how it works within that 3D object, okay, of what it's essentially pulling. But it still fades out to the chroma. It fades out to the neutrals there because that's based on the other layers in the selection, right? Let's just go ahead and go back to difference hue ramp mode. Okay, so like the preset original version. And now we've still got the ability to choose difference mode, which is going to extract more colors sometimes. See how it sort of changes the ramp from what the divide mode does. And this was like in the 1.0, it always worked in difference. So it didn't necessarily extract things if you wanted just a pure red and have it sort of fade out the right way to the gray and the other hues. The divide mode is what does that now. And I can just say divide mode blending, that sort of fixes it. I can still do maximum blending, medium blending, or minimum. And if I want to switch back to divide mode, if I've changed some things around, it's going to go through and do the smart checking again and determine that it's a pure hue and make sure it processes it the right way. So clicking divide mode is going to run a little bit of processing and get me back to what I had to begin with. And that's because I was doing the HCWB Custom Color Range 2, which works in the new divide mode. It would be like the divide ranges if I had started from those. Now again, we've got some things for the grayscale to determine if I want grayscale full range. Okay, we've got, that's basically turning off a whole bunch of stuff. We want to turn that back on. So we'll do hue range and chromatic and neutral only. That gives me only the neutrals. And chromatic only gives me all chromatic hues. We'll go back to hue range, and that gives me what I had based on the fact that I've got this set as a pure hue. All right, let me go ahead and turn the labels off so you can kind of understand what's happening. And our color detection layers are sometimes selected at the bottom there, but again, ignore that stuff down below. Same with these actions, just ignore that. Really, because this is not a grayscale color, remember I started with a pure red hue to extract from the document. If I do things like the grayscale full range, I believe that is really just not showing anything. Okay, it's basically turned off the hue mask and everything really below that has been turned off. Right, you can see I can turn these layers back on and off myself. Okay, the whiteness blend, the chroma blend, but really you kind of don't want to mess with those things yourself unless you really know exactly how this stuff works. If it's not a grayscale and I do full range, you know, it really depends on what stuff was on or off before from the divide mode blending. With the pure hue, the divide mode, if I hit divide mode again, should go back to what we had. Yeah, so with a pure hue in your selection, hitting grayscale full range is really not going to give you anything. Doing the hue range is what we've already got. If I say chromatic grayscale, you see that kind of includes the gray, but it's sort of made the hue 100% to the gray. So it's going from red to the chroma completely and white and black completely. We would say neutral only, and we will get just that. But again, we've got no gradients. Essentially, the whiteness and blackness of what I had picked here was 0. Okay, and chromatic only, that does give us essentially all of the hues. It's basically giving us the chroma only. We want to go back to hue range like we had for this particular example. So again, that's why I've labeled those gray scales. It's mostly if you have a mid-tone selected or something that's just gray and you want to get to the neutral only or the chromatic, etc. And so before, like I said, with the mask based on selection, I could select certain things and only use those in my mask. Let's just do that again. Let's say I only want this right here. And let's say I want some sort of area in here I can do any number of selections. I'll do mask based on selection. I've only got those. I can do replace color mask. And that's what I've selected into my mask, into my extraction, my custom color extraction. Now let's go ahead and we'll do make adjustments again. Okay, and let's say I don't want that mask anymore, mask for localized group. I can really just do delete the layer mask, or I kind of don't want to do that. I would really just want to go into it and just fill that with all white. Let me get out of this actually. We can go to the channel, look at it here. Maybe fill with white. I may add another action to this that does, you know, get rid of the color mask itself. You know, I'm not sure if you disable it or if you delete it, if it's going to actually create a new one. I'll have to look at that if it works or not. So essentially, if you're really going to mask based on selection, you just do that once. All right, making adjustments. We really want to look at this again with the labels. And I'm going to go to filter by name. I'm going to say levels. So you see I've got all these levels controls and the curves controls, right? We're going to look at just levels for now. There is another thing that they're not turned on, but they are essentially hue ramp control, or hue remapping controls, or the gradient remapping of them. It works for any of them really, but I'll get into that in a separate video. It's a little bit more advanced. So in this one now, you can see I've got the hue angle levels control right there. And we've got the chroma blending into chroma. Really, it won't do much if you have a pure chroma already. I could change this, maybe the white point of it. No, let's see, blending into neutral. That's really what's happening here. So we have a pure chroma that we selected. It's only blending into the neutral. And you can actually see that the blending into chroma has been, it's not visible. Really, it's not going to work on those layer groups. That's based on the divide mode, the smart functions I built in. When you pick a pure red or a pure orange, etc., it's not going to have certain controls. They really wouldn't function anyway. So we're only able to choose on this one how much it blends into the neutral. With the whiteness, it's pretty much not going to work and affect anything, right? You can see both of those are off. The whiteness and the blackness are off. Okay, and if I wanted to, I could perhaps go to difference mode blending. Oops, I want to make sure that I unfilter things first. I can just click one of these gray. So if it turns red, you just want to click one of the gray dashes here, go back to it. So difference mode blending, however, if I set this up, and maybe the hue, I'll keep that as divide hue. Let's go ahead and look at that. Nope, some of them are still off. Let's go ahead and do difference mode blending and see. It still only has the chroma. I do think there's a way to control some of this. Maximum blending. It really is because of the fact that you had a pure chroma selected. But I can go in here and turn some of these layers on. So let's go ahead and look at this. We've got the chroma blend layer group. And if you collapse the groups, it might be a little bit easier for you to see how this is built. Okay, it's essentially a chroma blend, whiteness, blackness, and the hue mask. So if I turn off the hue mask, you see it's including all of the hues. If I turn on the whiteness blending and the blackness blending, you'll see that basically it doesn't change. All right, it really doesn't affect it, but now we can have control over that. And you know, that may be something that I add in. It's because of the divide mode, sort of essentially making it that the pure red does not get knocked out of the selection. But let's go ahead and look at it now with those other selections on. And maybe we can do divide mode blending. Oops, I want to again make sure I have the filter off. Divide mode blending sort of fixes the way that that works as a pure hue. I've still got the whiteness and blackness groups on. And I can still choose if I want, you know, maximum, medium, or minimum blending. let's just go to divide mode blending. And looking at all the levels turned on, you wouldn't just turn them on that way, you'd do it through the groups. I may make some other actions before putting the update online that have the ability to just switch on and off the groups. So turn the Chroma group on, the Whiteness group on, Blackness group on, off. That would probably be very useful in doing this. So making the levels adjustments now, we can see we've got into the Chroma, not really changing, that still is off technically, and into neutral. So now let's look at the whiteness levels, so blending into whiteness. Okay, so now we've got independent control over this hue, blending into the white, blending into the shades. It really is not going to function with the fact that it's a Chroma and there's whiteness. I could use this part of it maybe. Yeah, just change that, but that's sort of the whole thing. Let's go to blending into blackness. So essentially, because it's a pure Chroma, it's either blending into black or blending into white a certain amount, right? I can choose to have this be like a hue that only blends into the gray and not the tints or shades or pure white or black, like so. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this one. And well, if I was done making adjustments, let me turn off the filter. I don't need this labels, that's really just for the video. Let's say I've made these adjustments to it and I want to replace color mask. Okay, so there we are. I can go on ahead on this, maybe make another solid color layer to see it in real time. So you can see I'm just changing the hue, just changing the color of what I've selected. Again, we can make adjustments. Again, look at that as a custom color, view it as a positive and negative, masked back over the original. Okay, so let's close this file and we'll look at the other ones. So very similar. Let's go ahead to the mid-tone one. And that was as if I had this tone selected and then ran the HCWB custom color range 2. And let's just go right into making adjustments. And I'm going to filter by name. We'll say levels. And you can see that each of these should work because it was a mid-tone. So I can control how much it blends into the Chroma independently. So this is like what I'm really excited about, the possibilities of selecting any custom color from an image and adjusting that mask with a lot of dimensions of control. It's not just like the color range tool in Photoshop, which lets you make basically one type of adjustment to the range. And but it does have some other features that are different than this. So it's really just a different way to approach selecting custom colors from an image, generating masks, working with it however you want to. So right here we've got blending into Chroma from that mid-tone, independent control over it, right? And again, I'm in 16-bit. When I'm zoomed in, it seems to function a little bit slower. I guess it doesn't matter if it's 16-bit or 8-bit, but I'm just gonna put this in 8-bit mode. And we'll look at it like this. So choosing how much that blends into the Chroma, independently of how much it blends into the neutral, independent of blending into whiteness, whiteness blending into shades, like that. Blackness levels, how much it blends into the blackness alone, and into the tints. And we've got the hue angle levels as we had before, right? Let's turn that filter off. We can still go to difference mode, and that's going to extract a lot more of the color. You can still make those same adjustments in difference mode. I can still do the maximum blending, medium blending, or minimum blending. And like I said, I may put in some actions to turn on and off the different layer groups, but those are kind of how it's built. So you might start doing things that make some of these other actions not really work correctly. I'm still on the fence about whether I'll put those in, but just showing you it's not that hard to do. You can look at these groups and turn them on or off. So it's, if we were just to look at one of them, you see essentially how it's working. It's extracting, let's say without the hue mask. So this is sort of the gradient that is within just the blackness of what I selected. And maybe I'll do minimum blending. Really, it's not going to change how any of those work. If I do divide mode, you might understand a little bit about it, but I want to be careful with those on and off. Let's just turn them back on. We'll do divide mode. And then you see how automatically that's a lot tighter. And I'm going to go into those groups again. And we'll just turn off the chroma, the whiteness, the hue mask. And now you can see how divide mode essentially takes the point at which it's selected and to where it goes to white and black. So if you want to just select a neutral gray, anywhere in the point that you select, it's going to make sure that fades out to black and white appropriately. But you can see what I've done with this. So the blackness is that gradient. The whiteness is this gradient. They overlap each other, and with a certain type of blend mode, linear dodge or screen or lighten, that is basically the maximum blending, minimum blending, and or the maximum, medium, and minimum blending. Okay. You can see how the hue mask, turn that on, splits out the other hues from what I had selected, the everything except for those reds. And then let's turn that off. Let's look at just the chroma. So you see where the point was, the midtone, is like right there with the chroma. It's right there with the whiteness, right here with the blackness. And so that's kind of how I figured out how to create this whole HCWB custom color range method, was based on the stuff I learned through the difference blending, putting a solid color over another color and getting the difference, and then doing that separately to the extraction of the chroma from the image, extraction of the whiteness, the extraction of the blackness, and the hue mask. So learning how to split, this is like following the logic of my first video about just HSB, getting the hue out of an image, and then HCWB, chroma, whiteness, blackness, and then all the stuff you can do with that is things like this action. So we got chroma, whiteness, blackness, and the hue mask. And again, that's because it's in minimum blending that it looks like that, and it's in divide mode. I can go to medium, maximum, and that now blends out to all of those correctly. The hues, if you want to correct that, you'll say divide mode blending. Okay, I'm going to conclude the video at this point and basically split this into two parts. I just realized it's about almost an hour into this video. And I'm going to be showing more of the tints, shades, what happens when you select a white, any neutral gray or black, and then we'll get into some real-world example images and how to use the HCWB Custom Color Range 2.0 with the updated features. And I may go ahead and put in some actions additional to this that have turning on and off layers for the white, the black, the chroma, and the hue mask. Okay, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.